Before there was time, before there was light, before even silence itself, there was nothing. Then, in a moment so brief it defies imagination, the universe was born. Out of this nothingness, a cosmic fireball burst forth, the Big Bang. From it spread particles so tiny they could pass through the very gaps between atoms we know today. In the chaos, hydrogen and helium came together, forming the first building blocks of everything that would ever exist. Stars flickered into life, colossal furnaces that burned with unimaginable heat. They blazed, they collided, they collapsed into darkness, and in their violent deaths, they forged the heavier elements: carbon, oxygen, iron, the ingredients of worlds and of life itself. In this grand theater, every explosion was both an ending and a beginning. Our solar system was born in one corner of the galaxy, a swirl of dust and fire orbiting a young star, the Sun. From this cosmic debris, planets began to take shape. Among them, Earth appeared, small, fragile, and raw. But in its infancy, Earth was no paradise. It was a battlefield. Meteors rained down relentlessly, shaping its surface, striking the newborn planet with such force that mountains rose, oceans boiled, and continents shattered before they even had names. One collision changed everything. A massive body the size of Mars struck Earth in a cataclysm so violent that molten rock was hurled into orbit. From that fiery halo of debris, the Moon was born, a constant companion, stabilizing Earth's axis, pulling the tides, and shaping the rhythm of our world. Without the Moon, our nights would have been darker, our climates harsher, perhaps even hostile to the fragile spark of life that was yet to come. Earth cooled slowly. Once a seething sphere of lava, its surface hardened. Gases trapped beneath the crust exploded outward, and volcanoes roared across the planet. They filled the sky with smoke, ash, and chemicals, creating the first atmosphere. Lightning flashed, rain fell, and oceans slowly gathered in the planet's great basins. The seas became vast cradles, rocking gently under the pale glow of a young sun. Imagine standing at the edge of that primeval ocean, though, of course, no human eyes yet existed to witness it. The air was thick with poisonous gases. The land was barren rock, sharp and unforgiving. Yet here, against every odd, the stage was set for something extraordinary. Earth had transformed from chaos into a fragile balance, heat and cold, water and stone, storm and calm. It was no longer just a planet. It had become a potential home. And so, out of stardust and violence, Earth stood ready, waiting for the first flicker of life to emerge in its oceans, a miracle billions of years in the making. In the silent depths of those primeval oceans, something unthinkable stirred. Within droplets of water enriched by minerals from volcanoes and lightning, molecules began to join, break apart, and join again. Out of this chaotic dance, the first cells were born. They were fragile, so small they could not be seen without magnification, yet they carried within them the power to change a world. These earliest beings found their nourishment not from flesh or fruit, but from light itself. Harnessing the rays of the young sun, they captured energy through photosynthesis. Slowly, almost invisibly, they filled the atmosphere with oxygen, a poison to them at first, but the very breath of life for creatures yet to come. For millions of years, the seas swelled with microbial colonies. Strange mats of cyanobacteria rose like carpets across shallow waters, leaving behind fossilized structures we still find today, called stromatolites. Each bubble of oxygen they released was a seed of the future, transforming Earth from a toxic wasteland into a cradle capable of sustaining richer, more complex forms. But Earth was not done with its trials. At least twice, perhaps more, the planet froze so completely that even the equator was locked in ice. The surface glittered white, oceans sealed under kilometers of frozen crust. Entire continents lay buried beneath an endless, lifeless winter. Scientists call these eras Snowball Earth. It is hard to imagine life surviving such global imprisonment, yet somehow, in cracks of ice, around volcanic vents, and deep in ocean trenches, life endured. That resilience would prove to be its most defining trait. Then, in a sudden burst of diversity, something astonishing happened. About 541 million years ago, the Cambrian explosion erupted, not with fire or stone, but with living forms. In the seas bloomed a menagerie of bizarre and wonderful creatures, trilobites with armored shells, worm-like predators with grasping jaws, and creatures with frilled bodies and many legs that looked like nothing alive today. This was life experimenting, trying out endless designs in a frenzy of creativity. The oceans became crowded theaters of survival. Creatures developed eyes to see, jaws to bite, armor to defend. Predators and prey locked in an evolutionary arms race that shaped the very trajectory of life on Earth. For the first time, ecosystems buzzed with complexity. Coral-like colonies built reefs, small fish darted between shadows, and giant invertebrates ruled the seas. Yet the land remained empty. Without plants, without food, it was a barren desert of rock. For hundreds of millions of years, all life clung to the seas, thriving but limited, dreaming, if life could dream, of what lay beyond the shoreline. The story of life had only just begun, but it had already proven its power to adapt, to survive, and to flourish, even when the planet itself seemed determined to erase it. From single cells to complex sea creatures, Earth was preparing for its next great gamble, the leap from ocean to land. For millions of years, the seas had been life's only sanctuary. But evolution, restless and bold, does not stand still. In time, a few daring creatures tested the boundaries of their watery cradle. Fins became sturdier. Lungs, once simple air sacs, grew more efficient. One day, in an act of evolutionary gamble, fish-like beings dragged themselves onto the barren rocks of land. It was, in many ways, the most reckless decision in the history of life. On land, there was no water to breathe, no plants to eat, no shade to hide in. Every breath risked suffocation, every step risked death. And yet, this step marked a turning point. What began as an accident became destiny. From those pioneers emerged amphibians, lumbering and clumsy, caught between two worlds. Over millions of years, they gave rise to reptiles, creatures perfectly suited for life above the waves. Reptiles mastered the art of laying eggs with protective shells, freeing them forever from the need to return to the ocean. From the reptilian line came giants that would dominate the planet for over 150 million years. The dinosaurs. Dinosaurs were not mere beasts. They were monarchs of Earth's ecosystems. Some thundered across plains with legs like pillars. Others soared on wings that stretched wider than a man's height. Still others hunted in packs, their teeth sharper than blades of obsidian. Forests shook under their footsteps, and oceans trembled at their roars. The age of dinosaurs was an age of glory, where nature experimented with size, power, and form on a scale never seen before. Yet nature is also merciless. About 66 million years ago, a colossal asteroid struck the Earth with a force greater than every nuclear weapon humanity would one day invent. The skies darkened as dust and fire spread. Plants withered, seas boiled, ecosystems collapsed. The dinosaurs, once invincible, vanished into extinction almost overnight. Only their smaller relatives, the birds, remained as living echoes of that lost world. But in destruction lies opportunity. With the dinosaurs gone, mammals, small, warm-blooded survivors that had scurried in shadows for eons, rose to prominence. They diversified quickly. Some returned to the seas as whales and dolphins, others took to the skies as bats, and many stayed on land, evolving sharper senses, greater intelligence, and the ability to nurture their young with care. Among these mammals were primates, who learned to grasp branches with dexterous hands, leap between trees, and later stand upright. Their brains grew, curiosity deepened, and they began to use tools. Rocks struck against one another to create sharp edges. sticks sharpened into spears. With these small but profound steps, the foundation of humanity was being laid. Still, the earth was not always kind. Periods of freezing cold returned, reshaping the land and challenging every creature. Yet mammals proved adaptable, surviving where others faltered. They carried within them the resilience of countless ages of struggle, a resilience that would one day define humankind. The reckless leap from sea to land, once nearly a death sentence, had ultimately given rise to the future rulers of Earth. The stage was set for the most unpredictable species yet: humans. The Earth cooled and warmed in endless cycles, glaciers carving valleys and seas swallowing coastlines. Out of this shifting stage emerged a new kind of creature, one that carried the resilience of countless ages and the spark of something unprecedented: imagination. These were our earliest ancestors, hominins, beings who walked upright and gazed across the plains with eyes that questioned. At first, survival was brutally simple. Fire was not yet a tool but a terror, and every day was spent in search of food. Our ancestors scavenged carcasses, cracked bones to drink the marrow, and learned to sharpen stones into edges. These crude blades, born in the Stone Age, were more than weapons. They were symbols of thought, of planning, of a species that could shape its environment rather than be shaped by it. Then came fire. Perhaps it began with lightning striking a tree, or the smoldering embers of a volcanic eruption. However it started, once humans learned to tame it, fire became a friend that chased away predators, warmed cold nights, and cooked food into nourishment more powerful than raw flesh could provide. It was a miracle disguised as a flame. Yet the Ice Age was relentless. For over 20 million years, humans and their ancestors endured cold that froze rivers solid and covered continents in sheets of white. In those ages, life was a constant negotiation with death. Tribes huddled together for warmth, shared what little food they had, and passed down stories by flickering firelight, stories that became the first threads of culture. But survival was not enough. In time, some humans began to look at the earth beneath their feet and the seeds scattered upon it. Instead of wandering endlessly for food, they began to plant, to nurture, to harvest. This leap into agriculture changed everything. Villages sprouted where once there had only been camps. Families stayed in one place long enough to build, not just shelters of branches, but homes of stone and clay. The land provided, but it also demanded. Tools became sharper, stronger. Stone gave way to bronze, and bronze to iron. With each new tool, fields grew larger, yields more abundant, and populations swelled. More people meant more needs, and more needs meant trade. Paths became roads, roads became networks, and soon goods and ideas traveled as far as feet and beasts of burden could carry them. Wealth gathered in the hands of some, and inequality arose. To manage these growing communities, humans invented rules. Laws scratched into clay tablets, spoken codes of conduct, punishments, and protections. Governments emerged, first as tribal councils, then as monarchs who claimed divine right. Alongside governance came another creation: religion. Humans looked to the sky, to the rivers, to the unseen forces of nature, and sought meaning beyond survival. They built temples and shrines, carved idols, and whispered prayers to gods of sun, storm, and harvest. Together, these forces, agriculture, law, faith, and technology, transformed scattered tribes into societies. And societies demanded movement. The wheel, simple yet profound, carried goods and people farther than legs alone could. With every turn of its spokes, humanity accelerated toward something larger: civilization. This was no longer just the dawn of humanity. It was the dawn of order, ambition, and dreams of greatness. The quiet flicker of firelight had grown into the blaze of cities, and the echoes of stone tools had become the heartbeat of civilizations. Humanity, once just another survivor in nature's struggle, now stood ready to bend nature itself to its will. Across fertile valleys and great rivers, Humanity's scattered settlements blossomed into civilizations. Where the soil was rich and the waters flowed steadily, entire societies took root. These were no longer small villages bound by kinship. They were cities, monuments to humanity's growing ambition. In Mesopotamia, between the Tigris and Euphrates, farmers learned to irrigate the land, drawing life from the rivers. Here rose the world's first cities, Uruk, Ur, Babylon, where temples touched the heavens and kings claimed their authority came from the gods themselves. The people carved their words into clay tablets, inventing cuneiform writing, so that laws, trade records, and epic stories would outlive their makers. It was here that Hammurabi's code declared justice, and here too that myths of Gilgamesh whispered of mortality and the search for meaning. Farther west, along the Nile, Egypt flourished. Every year the river flooded, spreading fertile silt across its banks. And with that rhythm, the Egyptians built a civilization of astonishing endurance. They raised pyramids that pierced the sky, entombing pharaohs as eternal gods. Their hieroglyphs etched on stone told stories of battles, beliefs, and the afterlife. The Nile was not merely a river. It was the lifeline of a kingdom that endured for thousands of years. To the east, in the valleys of the Indus River, mysterious cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro emerged. Their streets were straight, their drainage systems advanced, their planning precise. Yet much about them remains veiled in mystery, their language still undeciphered, their culture only half revealed through fragments of pottery and seals. In China's Yellow River Basin, another civilization grew, marked by dynasties that rose and fell with the turning of ages. Here, bronze vessels bore the weight of ritual, ancestors were honored, and philosophies began to sprout like seeds, ideas of order, family, and harmony that would echo for millennia. And then there was Greece, where rocky hills and scattered islands gave birth not to a single empire at first, but to city-states. Athens, Sparta, Corinth, each with its own spirit, each competing, fighting, yet also sharing ideas that would shape the very foundations of democracy, philosophy, and art. It was in Greece that people first dared to suggest that reason could rival myth, and that the human mind itself was capable of understanding the universe. Beyond their borders, trade wove these civilizations together. Caravans carried spices, silk, and precious stones. Merchants crossed deserts and sailed seas, exchanging not only goods, but stories, inventions, and beliefs. A Mesopotamian trader might carry tin for bronze, while a Greek sailor might return with papyrus from Egypt. Slowly, invisibly, humanity was stitching the world together. Yet as wealth grew, so did conflict. Armies marched under banners of conquest. Walls rose to protect treasures and palaces. Kingdoms became empires, and empires hungered for expansion. Still, beneath the wars and rivalries, a common thread endured: the relentless drive of humanity to organize, to innovate, and to leave behind something greater than itself. Civilization was no longer just survival. It was legacy. It was writing etched into stone, pyramids standing against the desert winds, and philosophies that would outlast the cities that birthed them. Humanity had stepped into an age of grandeur, and the world would never be the same again. As civilizations expanded, they sought more than land and wealth. They sought meaning. Out of their rituals and questions were born the great religions and philosophies that still guide billions today. In the Indus Valley and across the plains of India, Hinduism emerged, weaving together gods, myths, and cosmic cycles that promised order in a chaotic world. Later, from the foothills of the Himalayas, Buddhism arose, spreading its message of compassion and liberation across Asia. In the deserts of the Middle East, new revelations stirred. Judaism anchored a people to one God, one covenant, one history. Centuries later, Christianity emerged, inspired by the life and teachings of Jesus, offering redemption and a promise of eternal life. And in the 7th century, in the windswept deserts of Arabia, Muhammad received revelations that became Islam, calling followers to prayer, charity, and unity under one God. Faith gave people strength, but empires gave them power. In Greece, ideas had bloomed, but in Rome, they were forged into institutions. The Roman Empire stretched across the Mediterranean, roads binding provinces together, aqueducts carrying water to cities, and legions ensuring Rome's will was law. Yet even Rome was not eternal. In 476, the empire fractured under pressure from within and invasions from without, leaving behind ruins that whispered of both glory and decline. Still, Rome had left its mark: laws, languages, and Christianity, which would spread far beyond the empire's fall. Meanwhile, in the East, Byzantium carried Rome's legacy forward, blending Roman order with Greek culture and Christian faith. While Europe shifted, trade connected distant lands. The Silk Road stretched from China to the Mediterranean, a thread binding east and west. Along its routes traveled silk, porcelain, spices, but also ideas, technologies, and plagues. A Greek philosopher's words could echo in Persia. Chinese silk could clothe a Roman noble. The world, once divided by distance, was being drawn together. Empires rose and fell like waves. Persia's kings commanding armies from Anatolia to India. Alexander the Great spreading Hellenistic culture across continents in just a few short years. And in Africa, the Aksumite Empire raising obelisks and trading ivory, gold, and ideas with Arabia and beyond. Everywhere, humanity tested the limits of expansion. What is striking is not just the scale of conquest, but the blending that followed. When armies marched, they carried not only swords, but also languages, recipes, and stories. When traders set sail, they brought not only goods, but also beliefs and inventions. The world became a crossroads of cultures, where East met West, North met South, and nothing remained unchanged. Faith guided hearts, empires commanded armies, and trade stitched the continents together. Humanity was no longer living in isolated valleys or river basins. It was living in a web of connections. The destiny of one people increasingly intertwined with the fate of another. It was a time of prophets and conquerors, merchants and pilgrims, emperors and monks. A time when the human story was no longer local, but global. And from this web of faith and power, new chapters of history were about to unfold. Chapters of conflict, creativity, and discovery that would shape the medieval world to come. As the ancient empires crumbled, new powers rose to take their place, and the medieval world began to take shape. In Europe, kingdoms scattered across forests and plains grew under the weight of feudal order. Lords ruled castles, peasants tilled fields, and knights swore oaths of loyalty. The Catholic Church, vast and unifying, became both a spiritual authority and a political force, guiding kings and peasants alike with the promise of salvation and the threat of damnation. It was an age of crusades, holy wars waged to reclaim sacred lands. Thousands marched east, driven by faith and ambition, bearing crosses on their shields and banners. Yet for all the blood spilled, the Crusades also became channels of exchange. Returning soldiers brought spices, knowledge, and stories of distant cultures, weaving Europe into a wider world. Far to the east, China rose under powerful dynasties. The Sui reunited the land after centuries of division, while the Tang and Song dynasties oversaw golden ages of poetry, painting, and invention. Gunpowder, paper money, and the compass were born here, technologies that would one day change the world beyond recognition. Neighboring Korea and Japan also grew in strength. Korea consolidating under the Three Kingdoms, Japan evolving through the Heian era, shaping a culture of courtly elegance and samurai discipline. In the Arabian desert, Islam's rise transformed the Middle East and beyond. Within a century of its birth, Muslim empires stretched from Spain to India. In Baghdad, the House of Wisdom shone like a beacon, where scholars translated Greek texts, advanced mathematics, and charted the stars. This Islamic golden age preserved ancient knowledge and added discoveries that would one day fuel the European Renaissance. On the African continent, great kingdoms thrived. The Empire of Ghana traded gold across the Sahara, linking sub-Saharan Africa to the markets of the Mediterranean. In Ethiopia, stone churches were carved into the earth itself, while on the Swahili coast, vibrant city-states flourished, their harbors filled with ships from Arabia, India, and even China. Africa was not isolated. It was a vital node in the global network of exchange. Meanwhile, in the Americas, civilizations like the Maya built towering pyramids, charted the stars with astonishing accuracy, and devised calendars that outlasted their own kingdoms. Their cities, hidden deep in jungles, spoke of a people both scientific and spiritual, masters of both war and astronomy. Across the Pacific, Polynesian navigators sailed vast distances guided only by stars, winds, and waves, stitching together islands into a cultural tapestry of their own. By the year 1000, the world had become a patchwork of civilizations, sometimes clashing, sometimes trading, often unaware of one another's existence, but all moving forward in parallel. The Vikings braved the North Atlantic to reach Iceland, Greenland, and even the shores of North America. In Europe, kingdoms grew stronger, preparing for the Renaissance that would soon dawn. In Asia, empires prospered, their inventions setting the stage for revolutions in trade and warfare. The medieval world was not an age of darkness, as some later claimed. It was an age of connection, of experimentation, of seeds planted in every corner of the globe. From cathedrals rising in France to mosques gleaming in Damascus, from temples in Cambodia to palaces in Kyoto, humanity was building with a sense of permanence, striving to leave behind legacies carved in stone and written in faith. And though the people of that age could not have known it, their journeys, their inventions, and their struggles were paving the road toward a new era of global